Thank you. Eden Westbrook would have turned 26 on the 12th of August, but Eden died in a very public death in tragic circumstances in St Helens, Tasmania, in February 2015. She was found hanging by a rope in St Helens Park in the early morning. The police decided, though, quickly, much too quickly if you ask me, that Eden committed suicide. But the Westbrooks and I, and many others, are convinced that Eden did not take her own life. Eden's mum and dad, Jason and Amanda Westbrook, have fought for over 10 years to get to the truth. There are just too many facts that don't stack up. For example, when Eden's sisters saw her body before the cremation, Eden had bruises on her face and neck and her teeth were absolutely shattered. The Westbrooks and others have repeatedly asked the Tasmanian coroner to release Eden's autopsy photos. They also want an inquest and they want an independent coroner to assess the fresh evidence. Unfortunately, the Westbrooks have been frustrated by the refusal of the coronial authority, including Tasmania's Chief Magistrate, to release the damn photos. Thanks to the Tasmanian Attorney-General, Guy Barnett, and I do thank you from the bottom of my heart, on the 19th of August, the first day of Parliament since the election, tabled a revised bill to compel the provision of the autopsy photos to the Westbrooks by the coroner within 28 days. Those autopsy photos are key to unlocking this case. What do Eden's autopsy photos show? This is what we want to know. A fractured cricoid cartilage in the lower neck, inconsistent with hanging. Damaged teeth, bruising to the neck or face, inconsistent with a blunt force trauma. Bruising or ligature marks on the wrists. Any other undocumented injuries or signs of sexual assault. Why was the autopsy not undertaken by a qualified forensic pathologist in a NAT-accredited mortuary that met national pathology standards? Why were samples like material from beneath her fingernails taken for DNA testing? Why weren't samples like her underneath her fingernails taken for DNA testing? The Westbrooks asked Dr. Brian Collins, a respected independent forensic pathologist, to review the available forensics crime scene photos and consider issues like the manner and cause of death and time of death. Dr. Collins produced a preliminary report in March 2025, and now there is an independent expert evidence of a possible homicide. A copy of the report was provided to the Chief Magistrate in April this year. The Westbrooks believe Eden died on the 18th of February, not the 17th of February 2015, because in the days after Eden's death, a trusted police officer told the Westbrooks there was CCTV footage of Eden at the skate park at 2 a.m. on the 18th of February 2015. His viewing of the relevant footage is confirmed under the ITIs, and that officer unfortunately is now deceased. There are also relevant Facebook posts by a person of interest, including recent ones, which have not been investigated. Importantly, Dr. Collins' written report found that there was no reliable evidence to assist in determining the time of death. The evidence provided by police in affidavits concerning body temperature and rigor mortis was of little or no supportive value. The request by the Westbrooks, Dr. Collins and myself for the release of the autopsy photos has been refused, essentially on the basis that there was no legal proceeding on foot and it was not appropriate for any third party to receive autopsy photos. What a load of rubbish. It seems that early requests to the Tasmania's Coroner's Office did not include disclosure of the autopsy photos, as they were never on the court's coronial file. So does this mean that those photos were never even considered by the coroner? Good question for her to answer tomorrow. And the content of the autopsy photos and the final expert opinion from Dr. Collins are absolutely critical to reopening of the investigation. The Chief Magistrate recently responded to another request for the photos on the 14th of April 2025 after she had been provided with Dr. Collins' report, saying that she was considering the issues and would respond, and I quote, in due course, end quote. Well, 4 months later, still no respect for the family, and I still haven't had a response from you, let alone anyone else. And Dr. Collins' report is outlined on our Little Edie podcast in April 2025. By the way, there are 6 million people following this podcast. Dr. Collins found evidence of possible blunt force trauma to Eden and a second injury to the voice box or lower neck inconsistent with hanging and of the type that should have rung alarm bells. This is contrary to the Chief Magistrate's comment that there was no sign of any trauma to Eden in her decision several years ago to not reopen the matter. Dr. Collins advised he was considerably, and I quote, ill at ease, end quote, concerning the adequacy and the completeness of the police investigation and autopsy report. The pathologist who undertook the autopsy didn't even check to see whether Eden had been sexually assaulted. I mean, seriously. It was Dr. Collins' opinion that the completion of the autopsy that most appropriate cause of death should have been, at very least, and I quote, undetermined. Dr. Collins is frustrated and disappointed like we are, and in his 50 years as a practising forensic pathologist, he is unable to remember such a denial to access the photos. 2 additional crime scene photos have recently been discovered after the coroner's office forwarded a complete set to a rope expert in Canada who is assisting the family. One item, a hairband, could have been useful in determining who was at the scene that night. Why wasn't it seized as an exhibit? More importantly, why was the rope not seized as an exhibit? The Westbrooks have endured more pain than most. They struggle to understand how the coronial system can be so hostile. As if their grief wasn't enough, they and their families have had to endure gaslighting and intimidation and harassment from local police, particularly in days and months following Eden's death. Amanda and Jason's resilience and determination is remarkable. It is unbreakable. But they shouldn't have to go through this. They need answers. I want answers, and so do the people of Tasmania. Eden's death was treated as suicide within hours. Minimal forensics were even undertaken, and on the evidence available under the RTIs we've been collecting, the only police exhibit was a set of 10 fingerprints. What do you guess from Eden? Police did not seize. They did her fingerprints, but they couldn't do under her nails. Go figure. Police did not seize Eden's mobile phone or nearby CCTV footage to ascertain her movements that night. They didn't check her social media accounts. They didn't interview critical witnesses. They didn't even check past records of grooming. Inappropriate approaches by persons in authority to young women, and similar events in the St Helens area involving violence. What inquiries were conducted given allegations of pedophilia activity and other inappropriate behaviour by police in St Helens around that time? I certainly hit a nerve with the Commissioner of Police in Tasmania when I raised this issue in Parliament last time in a previous speech. Upon recent inquiries with her, I was advised that one officer of interest was still the subject of an ongoing professional standards investigation. I was very worried about the involvement of Senior Sergeant Paul Reynolds as a coroner's associate in the investigation of Eden's death. The coroner, in delivering her 3-page finding without inquest, stated in 2016 that the late disregarded pedophile, Senior Sergeant Reynolds, had provided regular oversight and direction to the investigation. Section 13.1 of the Tasmanian Coroners Act 1995 states that a coroner may delegate to a coroner's associate any function or power of a coroner other than the power of delegation or a power prescribed by the regulations. What powers, if any, were delegated by the coroner to Senior Sergeant Reynolds in Eden's case and in other cases? It is very worrying to think that Senior Sergeant Reynolds may have been exercising significant powers on behalf of the coroner. We can only hope that Reynolds had no role in drafting the findings in Eden's case, which failed to list the forensic science and autopsy evidence taken into account in determining suicide, and which failed to outline the reasons for determining Eden's death occurring on the 17th rather than the 18th of February. The WISE report, the waste report I call it, commissioned by Tasmanian Police, failed to examine Reynolds' role in Eden's case despite comprehensive written and oral submissions from the Westbrooks and their then lawyer. In fact, the WISE report failed to even mention Eden's case. It failed on a lot, the WISE report. The coroner's findings also state that there was no available evidence as to the origin of the rope, clearly contradicting police investigative findings, which were never followed up or confirmed. Police didn't even check the docks right across the road. I mean, how lazy are you? You didn't consider the nature and configuration of the rope and what that meant about its likely source. Lazy. Police investigation documents indicate the rope was never seized. Contrary to this, the coroner's office advised in writing that the rope was believed to have been destroyed as a result of the 2016 disposal order under the Act. Which account is accurate? Which one? Which one? How are the Westbrooks supposed to mount a case of reopening when the coroner's office won't provide critical information? There are wide-ranging and possible systemic issues involved in Eden's case, and there is concerning lack of NATA accreditation of both Tasmanian Police Forensic Services involving crime scene investigation and mortuary autopsy photos within the hospital and forensic medicine environments in Tasmania. Tasmania is well behind its interstate colleagues when it comes to adopting and following accepted best practices. The Tasmanian Police Manual is about as pathetic as a wet paper bag when it comes to required standards providing information on police powers and criminal investigation procedures. That's probably where you need to start, where you've gone wrong. An independent inquiry without any doubt needs to be established, effective immediately, to address the systemic issues, in this case to ensure ethical and best practice investigation and forensic science a less hostile approach by coroners, and the development of much-needed trust and confidence in Tasmanian police and, for God's sakes, our coronial system down there. I will have much more to say over the next week.